Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to this video where I'm reviewing all the rules revealed for the Space Marines on Warhammer Community today. This will cover all the units included in the Leviathan box on the Space Marine side, and I plan to do a video for the Tyranids as well. Make sure to look out for 2 other videos coming later this week where I show you my process of making a new color scheme for both Tyranids and Space Marines. Let's get into it. First up, we have the Leader, the Captain, and Terminator armor. For ranged weapons, he can be equipped with a Stormbolter or Combi Weapon. Personally, I'd take the Stormbolter for more volume fire that's more accurate. In terms of melee weapons, he can take either a Power Fist with 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, Strength 8, AP 2, Damage 2, or a Chain Fist, Anti-Vehicle 3+, with 5 attacks, Weapon Skill 3+, Strength 8, AP 2, and Damage 2. That's mainly to help him punch up against vehicles. Next up, we have the Thunder Hammer with Devastating Wounds, 5 attacks, Weapon Skill 3+, Strength 8, AP 2, Damage 2. Then we have the Relic Weapon, which is a sword or an axe or something like that, with 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2. Then we have the Twin Lightning Claws, which get the Twin Linked rule, so reroll all wound rolls. He gets 7 attacks at Weapon Skill 2+, Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 1. Personally, I'm think they're all relatively even. If I was going to take the Relic Weapon, I would probably change to just Twin Lightning Claws. I like having the more volume of attacks. But in terms of fists, I'd take the Chain Fist or the Thunder Hammer most often. I think those are the best options. The Power Fist also grants the Auxiliary Grenade Launcher, which grants him the Grenades keyword, which gives him access to the Grenade strat, but I'm not sure if it's worth it over the Chain Fist. He can also swap out one weapon for a Shield, which gives him 7 wounds, which would allow for an immense amount of wounds, as we'll get to in a little bit. He can lead the units that are Relic Terminator Squads, Terminator Assault Squads, and normal Terminator Squads. I'd say he fits them all well. He has the ability to reroll charges for him and his unit, and you can target the unit he leads with a stratagem for 0 CP. Personally, in terms of what I think he's going to be at his best leading Assault Terminators or normal Terminators. We haven't seen Relic Terminators. I assume they'll be very similar to normal Terminators. But one thing I want to do is lead a squad of Storm Shield Terminators. We saw in the Dark Angels previews that Storm Shields give them +1 wound now. So this guy with the shield and then 10 Storm Shield Terminators would give you 47 wounds at Toughness 5 with a 2+ save, which would be a nightmare for any enemy unit to actually get through, which is what I'm going to try and do. I love huge beefy units like that. But I'd still say he works out great with any kitted out Terminators. I think Chain Fist plus Cyclone Missile Launchers could make for a very solid, tough tank hunting squad, while still having some anti-infantry fire with the Combi Bolters and Storm Bolters and the frag mode on the Cyclone Missile Launcher. Overall, I think this guy's very strong. If you're playing Terminators, I would definitely bring him with you. Obviously, if you're not, he doesn't have much use as he needs to be leading a squad. So if you're bringing Terminators, I definitely bring at least one of these. In terms of loadout, I'd say they're all good. But my personal favorites are probably the Chain Fist or the Thunder Hammer. And then if you want to go pure anti-horde, Twin Lightning Claws. Next up, we have the Librarian in Terminator armor. He has Smite, a Combi Weapon, or a Stormbolter. I take the Stormbolter, which, again, same reasons as before. In terms of melee weapons, he has a Force Weapon, which is decent mid-strength against medium infantry. It is Strength 6, AP 1, Damage D3, with, I believe it's 4 attacks, hitting on 2s. His abilities are the Veil of Time, which gives the unit he leads exploding 6s. He also gives him a 4+ Feel No Pain against psychic damage, which is a good damage buff, but a niche but still strong defense buff, but it could also just do nothing if you're fighting an army that doesn't have psychic abilities. In terms of units he can lead, all Terminators. I'd say he works well enough with melee or range, but his melee on its own is rather weak. It's random damage, mid-strength, low number of attacks. I'd say Assault Cannons and Stormbolters is what I would run him with, because then you can just have huge amounts of attacks with exploding 6s, and obviously things like Assault Cannons have devastating wounds, and then his own psychic damage is good for killing slightly tougher targets. But I think he could also work with Relic Terminators, giving them like an autocannon and grenade launchers. And of course, they'd also be competent in melee. They're not going to be weak. It's just they'd be a bit stronger at range. This guy's a decent secondary pick to a captain. I wouldn't say he's better. I think his combat stats are worse. His leading abilities are worse. but he's certainly still strong if you want to go down the more volume of fire route with your Space Marines. Still, again, a solid choice. Next up, we have the humble Infernus Squad, which has Pyre Blasters and Bolt Pistols. The Pyre Blaster gets the Torrent and ignores cover rule, so it auto-hits and they don't get cover. It has a 12-inch range. It has D6 attacks, Strength 5, AP 0, Damage 1. And in terms of melee, they have 3 attacks, Strength 4, AP 0, Damage 1. Pretty standard stuff. Their abilities is any infantry hit by their flamers must test Battle Shock. I think these guys are actually pretty solid for objective grabbing, because not only can they cook any infantry they're fighting, when they're holding an objective, it's really difficult for any enemies to get close enough to take it back, because if they get close, they can use Overwatch and they will auto-hit 10d6 attacks, which is quite a bit. I think these guys would work best holding a home field objective to stop any sneaky units that maybe fly over or deep strike in, but also having a squad roam behind your front line to deal with any stragglers or anything that maybe tries to flank you and take your home field objective. Again, these guys are just very solid objective defense, even though their OC is a little on the low side for infantry like this. Again, a unit that I quite like. For example, I really like running Rubric Marines in my Alpha Legion, and I love a bunch of flamers like that. Next up, we have the Sternguard Veterans. Here we have my favorite one with my beloved Mark 7 helmet. I hope there is a way that I can get a lot of those helmets. In terms of ranged weapons, they can either take Sternguard bolt rifles, Combi Weapons, or Sternguard heavy bolters. I would always take the bolt rifles. I see zero reason to take the Combi Weapons, which is, it's sort of a shame, but I think their bolt rifles look sick, so I'm not really complaining. So in terms of bolt rifles, they are Rapid Fire 1, Assault, Devastating Wounds, and Heavy. So these guys can be either super mobile and still shoot and be accurate, or they can be stationary and shoot insanely accurate. They get 2 attack space, so 3 attacks in Rapid Fire range. They get Ballistic Skill 3+ at 24-inch range with Strength 4, AP 1, and Damage 1. Getting AP 1 is big because most small arms don't have AP anymore, or they have very low AP, so having a high volume of it is great. The Heavy Bolter has Devastating Wounds, Heavy, and Sustained Hits 1. That gives you 3 attacks at Ballistic Skill 4+, 36-inch range, Strength 5, AP 1, Damage 2. And then they get an extra attack on the base profile because they're veterans. So actually, I think these guys could tango with lighter infantry on objectives, but obviously they're still more ranged. So their main ability is once per battle, if they destroy an enemy unit, they can shoot twice. So they shoot at one unit, destroy it, and then shoot again. Honestly, their small arms are great. I think I'd pair these guys up with a Librarian to give them exploding 6s, because they have devastating wounds and things like that. I also think they pair quite well with the Ballistus Dreadnought, as the Dreadnought does better against full health things, so the Dreadnought can deal the alpha strike, and then the Sternguard Veterans can clean up the rest, and then they can turn their fire to shoot at something else, giving you more shooting, which is obviously good since all their weapons are strong against infantry. Obviously they could struggle against harder targets, but they do have devastating wounds, which can swing very high, and if you're fighting something that has the Oath of Moment declared on it, you can just fish for 6s, and you'll probably end up drowning them in mortal wounds. These are one of my favorite units out of the new preview, not only because this guy's wearing a Mark 7 helmet, which is the coolest Space Marine helmet, don't at me. Their weapons are strong, I really like their ability, and I think they have good synergy with other units. They remind me a bit of the Infernus Squad, but these guys are obviously, they do higher damage, but they're going to cost more. Overall, a great unit. One of my absolute favorites. I think it's designed wonderfully, and it synergizes well with, I believe, the next thing, that is the Ballistus Dreadnought. This thing has 3. It has the Ballistus Las Cannon, which is 48-inch range, 2 attacks, 3+ to hit, Strength 12, AP 3, Damage D6 +1. Pretty much the best anti-tank guns you're going to get. We very rarely see things above Strength 12 when it comes to range, on non-Lord of Wars, I should clarify. Then you have your Ballistus Missile Launcher, which has a 2 modes frag, which gets the blast rule, so for every 5 models, +1 attack. Then it obviously is 48-inch range, gets attack 2d6, which can lead to quite a lot of shots. Hitting on 3s, Strength 5, AP 0, Damage 1. Very good against light infantry, guardsmen, Eldar, Tyranid, swarms. But even being Strength 5, it could definitely stack some saves on Space Marines, but it won't do much against anything heavier, anything like Terminator weight class or heavier. There's also the crack mode, which gives you 48-inch range, 2 attacks, ballistic skill 3+, strength 10, AP2, damage D6. This thing's better for taking out, well, actually, dreadnoughts and other lighter armor, like rhinos or just lighter battle tanks, predators, stuff like that. And then it also has twin storm bolters, rapid fire 2, twin linked, so rerolling wound rolls. It's 24-inch range, 2 attacks, 3+, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. They're pretty much just kind of pointless, but extra damage doesn't hurt. And then melee, it has 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 7, AP 0, damage 1. So again, enough to stomp light infantry and maybe kill a Space Marine. Now the main thing that sells you on this is the Ballistus Dreadnought is the ultimate Alpha Striker. If it targets a unit above half strength, you get to reroll the hit roll. So all that very accurate fire is just going to get more accurate, and then obviously more hits through, more likely to wound. And then if it works with those, again, I mentioned earlier, I think it works quite well with the Sternguard. It will always have at least 4 quality anti-tank shots, or 2 anti-tank shots in its las cannon, which, if you're not a tank and you get hit with an anti-tank shot, you're still likely going to die. It's odds-on to kill even Storm Shield Terminators if they fail their save, because D6 plus 1, you're going to average 3-4 damage. Roughly. You can swing high, do 7, or you can swing low and do 2. It's the nature of D6 weapons. But also the frag mode on the missile launchers, great anti-horde clearing. If there's, say, a 20-strong squad of Tyranids, that's, what is that? That's going to be 2d6 plus 4 shots. That's pretty solid. You're going to get at least, at least 6, but you'd have to roll really bad to do that, Snake Eyes. You're probably going to average, let's see, about 10 shots against hordes, which is still very solid. Again, I really like how they designed this unit. I think it worked great with Sternguard Veterans. This thing softens them up, and then the Sternguards can do their double shoot, making anything that's targeted by that duo almost certainly dead, and then another unit is going to get some damage from the Sternguard's solid shooting. Next up, we have my personal favorite, the Terminator Squad. These guys have quite a few options, which they're probably going to get when they get their multi-part kit. They, of course, as we see here, this guy's equipped with an assault cannon, which is the coolest heavy weapon. I also think it's quite strong. It gets devastating wounds. It's 24-inch range, ballistic skill 3+, 6 attacks, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. So again, great for clearing hordes, and also those devastating wounds lets it punch up a little bit against other enemies. You can take a Cyclone Missile Launcher, which gives you a frag, which is blast, 36-inch range, 2d6, hitting on 3s, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. So worse than the Ballistus Dreadnought, but still, solid anti-horde clearing, but it's even worse against Space Marines. Next, we have the Crack Mode, which is 36-inch range, attack 2, ballistic skill 3+, strength 9, AP 2, damage D6. So worse against light armor. It's just worse than the Ballistus one, which makes sense. And then, obviously, you can take a Heavy Flamer, which ignores cover, assault D6, attack D6, sorry. Strength 5, AP 1, damage 1. Personally, I just take the Assault Cannon over the Heavy Flamer at pretty much any junction. And then you also have Storm Bolters for the rest of your squad. Rapid Fire 2, 24 inches, 2 attacks, ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Again, great anti-horde damage, and you can just have huge amounts of fire coming out of the squad. Now for your main 9 guys, you have a Power Fist or a Chain Fist. The Power Fist, attack 3, weapon skill 3+, strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. Chain Fist gets anti-vehicle 3+, 3 attacks, weapon skill 4+, strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. So again, you want to go tank hunting, bring the Chain Fist. If you want to just fight medium to elite infantry, bring the Power Fist. Then the Sergeant, unfortunately, is still stuck with a power weapon, which is attacks for strength, ballistic skill 3+, strength 5, AP 2, damage 1. Helps a little bit with clearing hordes, but personally, I just wish you could take a Power Fist. They have 2 abilities. They have one called Teleport Homer, which allows you to place your Teleport Homer miniature anywhere that isn't the opponent's deployment zone. Then you can rapid ingress for 0 CP within 3 inches of the Homer, and of course outside 9 inches of enemies. Best used as force bait, I think. It's going to be hard to screen that, but if the enemy doesn't, interfere with the Teleport Homer, they're going to have a huge block of Terminators appear, which is usually bad news for any army in the game. But another thing you can do is you can set it up in a risky position where you have something like a Ballistus Dreadnought watching it with line of sight, so that when the enemies come up to try and, keep the Terminators out, they're exposed, then you just crack into them with Sternguard Veterans, Ballistus Dreadnoughts, Devastators, whatever you want to use. Then they also have the Fury of the First, which ignores any modifiers to the hit roll or ballistic skill, if they want to, of course. And it is, they get +1 to hit against the unit marked for the Oath of the Moment, which means these guys with chain fists are going to be nightmares for knights, based because these guys are going to run up, they're going to be hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, AP2, so they're saving on 5s. Again, great tank hunting squad. I forgot to mark it here. I believe they get the +1 to hit at range as well, but I might be misremembering. Again, very solid unit with good durability, can be kitted out for most roles, anti-infantry, anti-tanks, or a mixed role. If you want to go with, say, chain fists and assault cannons, you'll have solid anti-infantry and solid anti-tank. Or if you want to go full into one or the other, you bring the power fists and the assault cannons, or the cyclone missile launcher and the chain fist. Overall, a flexible unit that is quite solid. They seem just a great anvil unit that can take a lot of punishment. Next up, we have, I believe it's the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. What a fantastic model, right? I love the lone survivor look, and his rules remind me a lot of Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series. So he has a Combi Weapon, which I've mentioned a couple times, but it's anti-infantry 4+ with devastating wounds and rapid fire 1. It's 24 inches, attacks 1, ballistic skill 3+, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. I think it's a pretty weak profile, even at half range. I mean, the anti-infantry is nice, but it's strength 4. You're going to be wounding most infantry at a 4+ anyways. Then his melee weapons are paired combat blades, which I assume this will be very similar to the ones the what are they called? Incursors have, and the Reavers. But he gets anti-Tyranids 4+, sustained hits 1, 5 attacks, hitting on 2, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. So this guy could actually, he could do some damage against Tyranids, even though it's no AP. He could sneak up on something like a Carnifex or something and actually still get a few wounds through. I'm not sure if he'd survive. He has, in terms of abilities, he's actually very strange. He's not exactly what I thought he'd be. He has a 5+ feel no pain, always very nice. He has infiltrators, so he can deploy in the midfield. He has lone operative, so he's not joining squads, but he can't be shot unless you're within 12 inches. And stealth, so even when you do shoot at him, you're -1 to hit. And he has another ability that when an enemy moves within 9 inches of this unit, which also would count as deep strike, because that counts as making a normal move, he can make a normal move. And he also has a buffing rule, like most characters, called priority objective. This one's a little strange. Basically, before the first battle round, you select one objective on the table. That becomes the priority objective. Then any Space Marines within 6 inches of him get to reroll wounds of 1 if they're attacking a unit that's on the priority objective. So, a slightly obtuse but decent damage buff. It applies to him. So you can set him up on the priority objective and then have him just be a nuisance because he can't be shot, and he's going to be sneaky. He's moving away from you when you get close, which could, say you just come into range with flamers. This guy basically just nopes out of there, and then he can come back and attack, though of course his damage is a little on the low side. He's certainly an interesting choice, though I'd probably just run him as a normal Phobos Lieutenant. I'd have to see how he performs in game, of course, and how much he costs. But this guy could be a very, very interesting sort of, you can't come in this area. He works like an assassin that you can't quite pin down. Probably an absolute menace to armies like Imperial Guard or Tau, because this guy, you start him in the midfield, and then you move him, and then as soon as they move an enemy to get line of sight, he runs into the next ruin. And then he's in the middle of your light army, and you can just start carving through people with those knives. Overall, I love the flavor of this guy. I'm just not quite sure how effective he was. I get it, he's the lone survivor of a Tyranid, Tyrannic War sort of scout squad, and he's the last survivor, so I get why he can't lead a squad, but it would have been nice if he could have Reavers or Incursors, Infiltrators, even Eliminators, I think would fit well with him. And then we're on to our last one, which is the Apothecary Biologus, or you might know him as Apothecary in Gravis armor, but he isn't really an Apothecary. We'll get to that later. In terms of range weapons, he has the Absolver Bolt Pistol, which is 18-inch range, ballistic skill 3+, strength 5, AP 1, damage 2, so essentially a heavy bolter in pistol form, but with less attacks. Then melee, he hits the exact same as the Sternguard Veterans, pretty weedy. He can lead aggressors, eradicators, or heavy intercessors. I think I would put him with aggressors, but you could also do heavy intercessors to benefit from his lethal hits rule, because then you'd have immense amounts of volume fire. But I'd say with aggressors, we'll see here in a minute why. His surgical precision, which is his leader ability, grants his unit lethal hits. His vivispectrum, which is his giant jar thing that he's carrying, is very interesting. If him and his unit kill a unit in melee, he gets objective control 9, which is probably the highest we've seen for an infantry model, and that just makes his unit pretty much the king of objectives. No one's going to be able to take it from them, but still, that's it for his special rules. In terms of thoughts, I think he's interesting. I'm not sure how strong he's going to be, because his own stats in combat and shooting are pathetic, but again, he could buff up heavy intercessors or aggressors. I think aggressors are actually the best bet, because lethal hits obviously helps them punch up, as they're only strength 8. But twin linked plus lethal hits means you're going to be converting a lot of your attacks into wounds. You'll be re-rolling the wound roll, and obviously a lot of your attacks will be auto-wounding anyways. I think he's more niche. I don't know how well he'll do with no way to heal people. He might have a stratagem like combat restoratives to revive a model or two. But for now, I think he's niche but cool. If I was running him, I would just run him as a normal apothecary and just use the model, because this model is awesome. It definitely is as on par with the other Primaris Apothecary, which are both great models. In conclusion, though, I really like the flavor of all these models. They're all very interesting. I think there's a bit more individuality to these units. They feel a bit more special, which I think is the goal with 10th edition. And in terms of rules, I think most of them are pretty strong. The only ones that I think are questionable are the Lieutenant, Solid Snake, as I like to call him, or the Apothecary biologus. They're both just niche, but I don't think they're bad just per se. I do like their rules. They're just a little bit more situational. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.